Welcome to my little presentation, damage control. My name is actually I'll just go right into the next. Let me do because I have a name part. My name is Eris. I use she, they pronouns. I am a trans femme non-binary artist that goes by the stage name Damage with a three. Um, I came out to myself in 2020 and I began my medical transition in 2022. Over the past 4 years or so of putting out music, we've grown. It's a pretty substantial community. And I have learned a ton. I feel like I've taught people a ton and I've learned even more. Um, so just with everything going on right now, I wanted to just take an opportunity to share some of the important stuff that I've learned, and hopefully bring any type of peace in midst all this confusion. Because I feel like if you're doom scrolling all day, it's easy to feel like the sky's about to fall, and it's not that simple. So let's get into it. The plan for today, we're going to be going over what we're dealing with. We're going to go over how you'll be affected and what to do about it. And then lastly, once you handle yourself, how you can help others do the same. Couple things for legal reasons, because I will go into a lot of stuff, and I also just want to I know how I represent myself online, so just want to kind of set the tone since this is Era speaking, not the character Damage on a song. Number one, absolutely nothing in this presentation is intended to encourage or advocate for the violation of any law or to conspire against any government or organization. Today, we're going to be going over some parts of the United States history, and we're going to be drawing comparisons to current economic, social, and geopolitical conditions. Any discussion of the future is pure speculation, and it should be taken with a grain of salt. And lastly, nothing discussed today is a legitimate cause for panic, impulsive decision making, or a crash out of any manner. Please use, please use your discretion when assessing your unique life circumstance and adjust accordingly. Also, amidst all of this, please be kind to yourself, be firm with your own boundaries and with others, and give yourself the nervous system, oh my God, give your nervous system the love and care it needs. I mean, even today, I'm a little shaky. I mean, just shit's crazy right now. So, before we dive into anything, you don't have to follow illegal orders. You know what, Jenny? This is this is not just our Discord. Let's be let's be on our best behavior today, Damage fans. I love all of you. So before we dive into anything, I want to go over three specific terms. I want all of these terms to be top of mind for y'all as we go through history, as we go through, agendas and all these sorts of things. I want you guys to keep these three concepts at the top of mind. So first thing, what is fascism? So a lot of times we hear this word being thrown around everywhere. And a lot of times it's describing people, it's describing political parties, it's describing governments, and they're saying it in the sense of like, oh, this person is fascist. Um, or this country is fascist. There's a fascist regime. Similar to gender, fascism is a spectrum. You have authoritarianism where you have, centralized control, you have decentralized anarchy where nothing's being controlled. Fascism is an ideology. It's not a political party, and it's not a form of government. We can't like flip a switch to turn fascist. It's a spectrum that shows up as a pattern of ultranationalism, strongman rule, and a wide suppression of dissent and rebellion at all costs. So, real quick, you've seen a lot of us versus them politics, just over. I can't remember when it wasn't us versus them politics. I mean, fascism runs on the idea, the concept that one group is the real nation and other people are some form of threat. It's pushing fear, division, and a protect our people mindset. So think about all the different ways you've heard that phrase. Um, some examples of how the U.S. has engaged in these politics in an actual way has been during World War II. Japanese Americans, due to the conflict with Japan at the time, we rounded them up and put them into internment camps. And this disrupted like thousands of people's lives. Speaking of disrupting and ruining the lives of thousands, the Red Scare was a witch hunt led by a sitting U.S. senator to oust alleged communist radicals. And, the trials themselves, the allegation themselves just blacklisted these people from American society. And so they take this, hey, we're the real whatever. We're the real people. We're the real nation. These other people are like these are the problem. Every problem you're experiencing is because of them, right? That's kind of the propaganda that gets you on. And then someone aligned with that comes in and says, "Hey, I'm your strong man, strong woman, strong they them. I have this charismatic and tough personality and I don't take no for an answer. I'm going to fix everything." And when situations are really complex, people really like the idea of a simple solution. Even now, a lot of leftist progressive people, you'll hear a lot of comparisons between Trump and Zoran. Not necessarily like from a morality or character standpoint, but in the sense of how they lean on populist ideals and they appeal to very consistent, clear, and very acute pains of their target audience. Um, both very charismatic people who have really effective messaging for their audience. Um, and with that messaging, it can't be questioned. There's no dissent allowed. We don't like disagreements. We don't like arguments in this world. Fascism likes to silence critics, journalists, social media comments, punish opponents politically, or honestly, do anything to scare and push people into being loyal to the regime. Um, Historically, we've seen that kind of with McCarthyism. Again, people were fired, evicted, blacklisted just for being accused and being held for trial during the Red Scare. I mean, it just, sorry, I had to gather my words. Similar to what we are seeing today with companies like American Eagle and the Sydney Sweeney ad. We're seeing corporate legal firms, like some of the larger corporate law firms turn a blind eye to a lot of what is ultimately just like kind of legal consulting work that they typically provide the federal government. Um, and when a fascist regime takes hold and starts kind of bending the rules and the rule of law, when the industry, the private industry, the legal industry, who that's kind of like what they do. You know what I mean? It's almost like a paper company or a lumber company, like kind of shrugging their shoulders at a meteor hitting their forest. Say what you want about lawyers, their world is law. And there is a passion and a dedication to that craft. So, I mean, you start to see even firm institutions with those types of values bend the knee in advance because of fear. So with McCarthyism back in the 60s and the 50s, your boss, so if you got rounded up by the Red Scare, and then your boss was like, "Why didn't you come to work?" "Oh, I had to go testify in front of Joseph McCarthy." The mere fact that you had to do that, the fear of the government made a private institution cut your job, evict you from your house. That is effectively the point of all of the fear, is so that you comply in advance because of the fear of something happening, not necessarily a literal gun to your head. It's more of the idea of one and wanting to just avoid that situation and not disrupt your day-to-day life. So, fascism is an ideology. It's not a person. It's not like, a black and white type of thing. Um, it's divisive. It reduces complex issues to a simple, strongman, fixable issue, and it doesn't tolerate disagreement. Cool. So, term number two, intersectionality. You've probably heard this word a lot too. And it has a couple of popular misinterpretations. And I want to give special credit to the person who coined this term, Miss Kimberly Crenshaw. She is a legal scholar. Back in 1989, she coined this term when she was working at Columbia Law School. She currently teaches at UCLA Law School, and she specializes specifically in race and gender issues in regards to, master's level legal stuff. She is a contributor to what eventually became critical race theory. She's a prime contributor to that and is a very, very brilliant person. I did want to just shout her out and make sure that we all know where the word comes from, because a lot of white women say it online. I kind of just wanted to point that out there. Um, the definition, as according to the dictionary, it is the complex and cumulative way in which multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, classism, can combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the lived experiences of marginalized individuals or groups of people. So there are some misinterpretations of this. What it is purely is it's a lens of understanding. It is a way, a framework to look at individuals and groups of people beyond, you know, one category or even the cumulative one plus one equals two. This is a very one plus one equals three thing. Ms. Crenshaw, as well as a lot of folks in the queer community, we like to believe that we are greater than the sum of our parts. And this is a kind of demographic extension of that framework. It's expansive, just like we are. We're something greater than the sum of our parts. Man, I already said that part. And it's inherently interconnected. We don't live in a vacuum. We live in an interconnected world. So I think making sure that these three things, that's really all it is. It's a framework of looking at the world, and it's an important thing and degree of detail to consider when we're talking about how legal policies are going to be affecting a bunch of different groups of people. What it's not, because you probably have seen this online and you will, people tend to think this way. It is not the oppression Olympics. This is not a means of competition. There is not a more oppressed or less oppressed. There are obviously some pains that we may, maybe think that famine is a little bit uh, greater of an issue than, uh, get made fun of on the street. I don't know. Like there's obviously, degrees of suffering, but the point of intersectionality as a framework of thinking is not necessarily to rank or add some sort of hierarchy to it. It's also not exclusive to any group of people. So this applies to cishet white men. This applies to like, and I threw that out there because sometimes we want to leave them out. But this applies to everybody, because we all have our own unique walk of life. And yeah, so I want us to keep that in mind when we talk about how fascist, see, here I go again, speaking fascist. When we talk about how the political tendency of fascist ideology can affect people at an intersectional level. The last thing we're going to talk about, definition wise, is bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy is the right for individuals to make their own decisions about their bodies, their health, and their future without coercion or interference. This is going to include the right to control your health care, your reproductive choices, and what happens to their body based on the principle of self-determination. So, decision making. This is the right for you to make all of the decisions about your body. Sounds pretty simple. Some current controversial issues that are surrounded around someone's ability to make their own decision would be abortion, contraception, whether or not to have children, whether or not to have sex at all, or the decision to pursue medical gender affirming care. Um, these are all decisions that a lot of people want to stick their nose in, and ultimately it's between the individual. Self-determination. This is the fundamental concept around human rights and freedom and democracy and pretty much everything that we, kind of value in this world. It's a fundamental human right. It's built on the right to privacy and the freedom from violence and coercion. Um, and it's heavily linked to the concept of consent. Nobody should be able to make a decision about another person's body without their permission. So Now that we understand these terms, we're going to take a quick look back at recent history to get a better understanding of how the US government could systematically limit or control the bodily autonomy of its citizens. And then after that, we'll go into the intersectional lens of here are a couple different groups. Um, and here specifically is how they could be affected and how specifically we could mitigate those risks. Water break. Oh, also, I will put a trigger warning. The history will mention some detail of the attacks on United States on September 11th. Just a little trigger warning. So before 2001, the United States government had a very laissez-faire, right? Not even laissez-faire is the right word. The United States government was not too preoccupied with surveillance. This was before a lot of the digital age. Um, and a lot of the way we today, and I say we, I'm talking about Gen Z and even, some younger millennials and some Gen Alpha, we have lived with cell phones, we have lived with the internet, well, let me rephrase, we have lived with the publicly accessible internet. Um, Prior to 2001, for the majority of the 20th century, the US wasn't super concerned about surveillance compared to how they are today. The thresholds for even performing surveillance legally were much, much higher. This needed to be exclusively a foreign threat. Um, and it started ramping up in the 70s to the point where we created these special courts. We passed the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and we created FISA courts to approve these instances of surveillance. It was aimed primarily at foreign threats. You have to think this is when we really started militarily going after communism. This was Vietnam. This was right after Korea. Our foreign policy is heavily involved in economic control globally. So we created these situations so we can start being more strategic about how we assist people's economic transitions. Um, this kind of was the status quo after between 1978 and 2001, and then towards the end of 2001, this happened. September 11th, 2001, the US was attacked both in New York City and at the Pentagon. It destroyed thousands of lives. And to this day, the surviving first responders to this attack have had long-term battles with their health and have been repeatedly, their healthcare has been repeatedly attacked. A little personal anecdote. This is arguably the most pivotal event in US history for this century. And I'll show you why. About a month, October 26, 2001, we passed the Patriot Act. It was an emergency law passed with flying colors through the House and Senate. It allowed for the government temporarily, in times of war, basically, um, to perform bulk collection of American citizens' communication data. Um, the reason for this was the US at the time, their story was that they were not privy to this attack being imminent. It was discovered later that they actually did have the data. They just didn't have the technical visibility to see it. They were actually during from 1999 to 2002, the FBI was doing what's called the Sentinel Project. This is actually not even in the PowerPoint. It's just something I learned in college. They were performing the Sentinel Project, which was them moving formally for the first time from paper files to digital files. And during this window, September 11th, attacks happened. So according to the US government, they actually did have the data. They could have stopped it. Were they not in the middle of basically moving, uh, which is kind of crazy. That being said, we went to war almost immediately after this, and in response to that, we're now looking at this. The reason I brought up the government, claiming to have no knowledge of it is that was the narrative that allowed to justify why we would then turn our scope to American citizens, because this happened on an international flight coming into New York. So the idea was we need to increase screenings of all American domestic activity. So with that narrative, the people who were terrified, because this was for most people's lifetimes the first like major attack on U.S. soil. That's kind of the other end of the double-sided sword of America doing what they do is we are not privy to lived experiences of living in a war zone. This was like the first time that modern American society, you know, got hit back, and it sent us into a rage. So there were three specific things in the Patriot Act that specifically allowed these very important things. So Section 215, it allowed the government to collect any tangible things. So keep in mind, we're going to be seeing insanely vague language, and just keep in mind everything we've been talking about, including phone records, internet logs, business records, even of people not convicted of a crime. 206 allowed for roving wiretaps, continuous roving wiretaps, allowed surveillance across multiple devices. So that's your landline, your computer, all that stuff, without a search warrant. Um, and then Section 218 dramatically lowered the threshold for those FISA courts that we created in 78. And we changed from the primary purpose being foreign intelligence to a significant interest in foreign intelligence. So again, we expanded and added a lot of ambiguity to the language, which is a tool for interpretation. It was supposed to be temporary, but in 2005, we renewed our subscription. These temporary data collection power were now made permanent. We reauthorized in 2005 and 2006, making specifically Section 215 permanent. In 2008, we amended the FISA courts and gave legal protection to private tech companies cooperating with the U.S. government in their surveillance of any entity or individual. And then lastly, we added Section 702. This allowed for warrantless surveillance of foreign and domestic targets. What they said at this time, because now people were like, whoa, 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 this was a temporary thing. We're at war. Drastic times call for drastic measures. Why are we extending this? This is not a good precedent of the relationship we want to have with the government. We pay you taxes, you fix our roads, and, someone shoots someone, you put them in jail. That's kind of the general idea of modern American society. And what the government said is, well, if you don't have anything to hide, if you're not doing nothing wrong, you got nothing to hide. So, like, what's the problem if we snoop through your phone records? You're not talking about committing terrorism. And people were like, okay, well, as long as they're not going to use it on me, they wouldn't collect my data because I haven't done anything wrong. But that was a lie. We were doing it a lot. Secret got out in 2013. A wonderful American hero named Mr. Edward Snowden, who was a previous employee at the National Security Agency, he revealed the existence by leaking classified documents on the internet, of previously classified mass intelligence gathering surveillance programs being officially run, behind the scenes. He was charged with criminal espionage, and he still faces those charges to this day. He fled the country, and we haven't seen him since. Well, not haven't seen him. And so it was a whole big hullabaloo. Snowden got out. But now the American public at large had concrete proof, government official stamp documents that the government were like, yeah, no, that's our stuff. And we're going to validate that by criminally prosecuting the person who released it. Um, and we had proof. Everything that all the tinfoil hat folks were saying back in the early 2000s was like, well, shit, they really did that. People were furious and they clocked our tea, y'all. Specifically Prism and bulk phone metadata collection programs collected billions with a B in the early 2000s, billions with a B of phone call records from telecom companies, and did not require any suspicion of wrongdoing. For Prism, which is Section 702 of the Patriot Act, the government collected emails, chats, videos, and cloud data directly from tech companies. Google and Meta gave them the data. Palantir gave them the analysis tools to actually crunch the numbers. And then Oracle, who was owned by Larry Ellison, who just bought TikTok, provided the database and the technological infrastructure for them to store and process all of this data. And they all, according to the FISA amendments, have legal protection. And it is basically now, according to the Constitution, it is their American duty to comply with the government by providing this data. So it is no longer a moral decision of someone like Mark Zuckerberg. It's completely out of their hands. And so the Supreme Court had to step in. This was the Supreme Court at the time. Um, they started limiting some of the surveillance programs, passing some rulings, putting shit on paper. In 2015, they were sued and, they ruled that the phone metadata program was illegal because of the how broad of the data collection. The Congress was basically like, we didn't say you could collect billions. We said if an American citizen was doing some terrorist shit, we could get that. We never said billions. And so they pulled that back. And in 2015, we passed the Freedom Act, which officially, like banned the program. But in the Freedom Act, it renewed Section 702, which was PRISM, if we remember, Google, Meta, Palantir, and Oracle. So that is the fun little dance, keeping 702. And then in 2018, we reauthorized it, allowing for a vague language. We could collect communication data if it was incidental, meaning, if we were doing some sort of bulk sweep and your data got caught up in it, oh well, we were going after Palestinian support sympathizer terrorists in Los Angeles and your IP got swept up in it. And oh wow, you reshared that. You reshared that infographic. Interesting. So, what changed after the Supreme Court rulings is basically nothing. The legal use was paused, which, if we remember what they said in 2001, the whole time they have not been honest about this shit. Effectively, we gave them a slap on the wrist. The police policed the police, and now all that's really happened is we have been able to use government, or we've been able to use tax dollars to work with tech companies to rapidly advance the technology that now has some of the most scary capabilities we've ever seen. To this day, tech companies are providing data via FISA court orders, which are happening all the time. Palantir remains a major contractor for the US and Israel and many other countries. And then Oracle, as well as Amazon AWS, which hosts 60% of the internet, Google Cloud, have worked together with their big data infrastructure to make government requested access to data easier than it's ever been. So, a quick recap before we move on. We got scared and we let them in. Even with the reforms that have been put in, there is not a clear path currently of how we as an American population can walk back this relationship that the government now has with data collection. It is that's just kind of what's happening right now. It's too good. That data is sweet, sweet data. Um, so the takeaway, pre-2001, before 9/11, we spied on people, but it was more focused on toppling any sort of socialist or democratic economy abroad. It wasn't really focused on US citizens. Patriot Act happened, and now we're going to spy on everybody. We expanded it, and we started colluding with tech companies to advance their ability to provide the government what they need to fight the wars they want to fight. 2013, we had concrete proof that they have been lying and abusing the permissions that they took from us. And then 2014 to 2020, we saw some pageantry coming out of the Supreme Court to, slap on the wrist. And then today, the infrastructure is there. They're 25 years in practice of doing this, and they have all of the legal framework to subpoena anybody and anything that they wish. So I thought most of y'all are probably thinking this right here. I thought this was a trans thing. Why are we talking about data? Um, this is why. Right now, all three branches of federal government are controlled by a group of people who identify as Christian nationalists. Christian nationalism is a movement that seeks to reshape the United States law and social culture so that government policies, public institutions, and national identity align with a Western conservative interpretation of Christianity. Its goal is to elevate this religious worldview as the standard and only acceptable, for public life, specifically at the expense of pluralism, multiple things being true, secular governance, which is separation of church and state, and minority rights, which is us, among many other people. Um, so the problem that we see when we're talking about fascism is it doesn't matter whether or not it immediately serves you and the things you believe to be right. The ways in which it can be abused um, are, as of our recent history, very well documented and observable. The reason I brought up everything in this specific order is to paint this picture of we have let a particular ideology of us versus them stress the public and the government enough to pursue strongman fixes to what are ultimately very complex intersectional issues. So, what happens when the technological infrastructure was built exclusively with the intent of applying government oversight and control over its citizens, whether that is queer run communism or a Christian theocracy very similar to The Handmaid's Tale, the mental framework that allows for those things to happen is ultimately very, very dangerous. Um, and right now, our folks are just on the shit end of the stick that we all kind of helped create in terms of, and I say we in the sense that I'm sure plenty of us were at school board meetings and we're protesting the war in Iraq and doing all of these things. But when I say we, I'm talking about the way it's gone down, you know? Um, that's what's happening right now. And this is going to affect us in a lot of different ways. And I want to go into that for our last little bit and open this up to some questions. And yeah. So remember this beautiful little graph. It shows how everything's overlapping and connected. You're going to hear me go through a lot of these categories and how they could be affected by the political goals of the alt-right, who again currently control the entirety of the federal government. The general theme that I want you to understand before I just start listing a bunch of scary shit and you start freaking out is that currently, if you look at any one of these categories, each of them currently has some form of protection at the federal level. These protections were won and fought for with blood, sweat, and tears from their respective communities. As it stands right now, for many folks, especially for naturalized U.S. citizens not convicted of a crime, it is a very unrealistic scenario that the government is going to come get you, in the sense that the federal government would take an offensive strategy to actively seek and destroy its citizens on a targeted basis unless you are legitimately some form of high profile risk. If you're not stockpiling weapons, if you're not trafficking large amounts of data, like, let's bring it down a little bit. You may fall into a category of people that will be put under political pressure, but it is unlikely that you are truly the Osama of the trans community. So for a lot of folks here in the United States, we need to not be actively worried about, and I really think the rhetoric of the camps and all of that, I think it is dangerous to overly focus on because I'm not saying this out of optimism, I'm saying this out of pragmatism. It is a much more likely scenario that the federal government will simply strip away federal protections and let you die trying to fend for yourself before they ever send Jason Bourne after you to get you in Florida so Elon can put a chip in your brain. Therefore, I do think it's a bit ridiculous to think that transphobia in 2026 is our largest threat to trans people. Many of you may be thinking, but Aries, that is not my concern, and that sounds kind of like conspiracy theories. I agree with you. That being said, I am here to address the trans community. And what I hear on a daily basis, what I hear on a daily basis from my trans community is this exact concern. Damage, they have my data. They know I'm trans, and they can ping my phone, throw me in a truck, and I'm never seen again. It's unfortunate that these sentiments can become very, very real in our heads to cope with the more sobering and depressing fact that we are viewed as disposable enough to just be left to wither and die without exclusive protections. And for a lot of trans folks, there can be, including myself sometimes, there can be kind of a sick comfort to thinking, well, at least I'm radical enough to get sniped. You know, at least I'm a villain. But whatever comfort you get from that, whatever masochism you engage with by, overly fantasizing about that, it's a big deterrent to you as an individual being as physically, as financially, and emotionally prepared as possible for what will ultimately be an increased level of systemic social isolation. The most prevalent and realistic harm that we as trans people will all face in the United States over the next 2 to 5 years will be economic suffering at a level never seen before in the United States. Transphobia is not an immediately bigger threat to trans people than AI displacing up to 50% of the labor market over the next 5 to 10 years, with zero plan for what to do for those people. For my Gen Z folks, we are about to be witnessing for the third time in our lifetimes the largest upward transfer of wealth in recorded history. With these tariffs, with the fucking AI bubble, all of this that's happening. And while these social issues will disproportionately hurt marginalized communities, that racism is still there in bull markets. As poverty rises, so does crime. Your day-to-day risk is much more related to the well-being of everyone in your neighborhood, in your city, than any law that's going to get passed, at least in the next 2 to 5 years. So the reason for that is federal laws, state laws, local laws, they take a hot minute to actually materialize into your day-to-day experience. Even with Trump's approach, his hastiness doesn't actually do things faster. He just makes everyone really anxious. And what that does is that frazzles you to prevent you from doing what is actionable, what is accessible, and what will keep a level head, because these people are banking on us panicking. Because when we panic, we're not organized, we're not rational, and we're not able to respond to the situation. Because the reality is the situation is here, and we can't just wish it wasn't. So let's get into what to do. For my non-white folks, this is going to be one of the most broad thing that's going to be happening under the Trump administration. White supremacy is back. We are going to be seeing cuts to civil rights enforcement, reducing protection from a resulting increase in social discrimination. You're going to see more policing and surveillance in already over-policed neighborhoods. You're going to see a reduction in funding for social programs. This is going to affect a lot of people's health, their housing, their access to education. And we're going to see greater targeting of campus activism involving students of color. It's a whole thing. How to prevent this? Building and strengthening existing local community defense networks, so legal aid hotlines, rapid response organizations. It's huge. There's already things in motion. Pour gas on that fire and let's get going. Using encrypted communication to stay organized and to advocate. Like, we shouldn't be doing this on Meta. We shouldn't be doing this on Instagram. And we're going to be encouraging community members to show up to local elections. And that might not sound sexy enough, but I'm sorry, it's what we got. Go to the school board meeting, go to the city council, and make some noise. For my non-Christian religious folks, or honestly even anybody who isn't part of white Christianity, you will start to see a social privileging of Christian perspectives in public policy and education. You're going to see a selective enforcement of religious freedoms protections and heightened suspicion towards Muslim, Sikh, and progressive Jewish communities. Keyword progressive. And you'll see an increased monitoring of religious groups involved in activism, including the phrase Free Palestine, which I will say 3 more times, Free Palestine. Um, Prevention. We need to be documenting everything. It might not save you right now, but when this pendulum swings back, we want our receipts. We're going to be forming interfaith coalitions to increase our effectiveness and to gain public support. When we show unity, it makes the evil show itself. Um, we have to band together here. We have to train each other, challenge each other, so that we understand our legal rights, even though they might not matter that much. Knowledge is power. And then establishing trustworthy relations with journalists, with local journalists, national journalists, early, right now, before they start getting the real pressure from a fascist organization. My disabled folks. There are going to be massive cuts to Medicaid, which will also include support systems for home care and for disability services. We will see weaker enforcement of ADA rights in both workplaces and in public services. We're going to be seeing a reduction to special education programs and the oversight for those programs for children. And then there will just be an even more increase in difficulty accessing mental health care. Um, how to prevent this? Connect with existing Disability Rights Coalition for representation and rapid legal support. Tapping in with people that are already in motion, already doing this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to grease it and make it look good. Keep formal documentation of everything, all your service needs, all of your service denials, everything. Build mutual aid networks for transportation, caregiving, emergency support, financial aid, and then stay local, get active. Um, I will keep reiterating this. Honestly, we need to stop worrying about federal politics. That it's gone. We're done. The city and the state, that's what we got. The unhoused. This is a whole other rabbit hole, but we're going to be seeing cuts to housing programs, cuts to shelters, social service outreach, and an increase in ticketing, arrests, sweeps, while the physical abuse by law enforcement during these sweeps dramatically increases. And then we'll see greater barriers to long-term supportive housing. Um, ways to prevent this: partnering with legal aid and homeless rights organizations that challenge these unlawful sweeps, taking advantage of state level housing programs. Some states will actually expand if federal support shrinks. I can imagine California doing that, Oregon, Washington State, for example. So please pay attention to your specific state if this is something that's going to be affecting you, because you may actually have more resources in response to a federal cut. That is an example of kind of why I want everybody to calm down a bit when we hear these crazy situations. Is the reality is we will be losing protection on a federal level, but the community needs to have our back. Speaking of the community, we're going to be seeing rollbacks of federal non-discrimination rules for employment, housing, and schools so that they can legally pick on us in the lightest way I can say. We're going to see restrictions on gender-affirming care and mental health support for trans people at any age. We're going to see an increase of censorship of LGBT topics in school spaces as well as the public media, and we will all be more vulnerable to workplace and medical discrimination. The ways to prevent this: know the legal protections that still exist at the state and municipal level and take advantage of all of them. Create, improve, and expand existing local trans and queer support networks, safety networks. We're going to be, again, documenting all instances of discrimination for future legal claims for when this pendulum swings back. We go and get ours. Strengthen alliances with teachers' unions, healthcare workers, civil rights organizations. Do not hide. Keep fighting and get more involved than you ever have been. For immigrants, we have seen dramatic spikes in detentions, deportation, workplace raids, and a lot of visa revocations. We're going to see higher processing fees and tougher rules for what is already one of the worst legal immigration pathways in the world. We're going to be seeing fewer protections for asylum seekers and international students, and way more data sharing, callback, to between federal agencies and local police. That would be ICE and your local police union. Ways to prevent this: create or join local rapid response networks to handle ICE encounters. If you have seen TikToks of citizens, neighborhoods swarming an ICE raid, it is from these organizations. You have to join one of these. It's like, it's this is how we stop them. Preparing family safety plans, similar to how people have earthquake plans, hurricane plans. Having a plan, passwords, a safe house, a good address, places to go, having that already ready to go because you can't tell ICE, hold on, let me go get my thing so I can evade you. You have to be ready. Seeking trusted immigration lawyers early, even when we're talking about small status questions, just staying in touch. Do not let, if you're working with an immigration attorney, stay on top of them. Um, Avoid sharing sensitive info on unsecured platforms like Meta, which is Instagram, Google, Discord, all that stuff. Use encrypted messaging. A great option is Signal, and I know there are others that I don't even know about. Um, and then lastly, support and volunteer with local sanctuary organizations and immigrant resource centers. That one is more for U.S. citizens. Please, naturalized U.S. citizens, we are the ones who need to be on the front lines defending immigrants. And lastly, women, birthing persons, and children. I actually humorously had a tough time coming. I almost said like women and non-men. I did not know how to word this for a second. But women, birthing persons, and children. And I promise we're about to wrap up because I know we're a little over time. We're going to see reduced access to abortion, contraception, and reproductive health care. We're going to be cutting a lot of child care support. We mentioned Medicaid, family assistance programs, increased economic pressure on low income and single mothers, especially as Christian values begin to rise, reduced funding for special education, nutrition programs, mental health services, and less federal oversight of discrimination against minority or disabled children. Ways to prevent this: learning self managed care laws and exploring safe telehealth options when legal, especially when we're talking about red states. We're going to build local child care cooperatives and resource sharing networks. These are things that I'm getting ahead of myself. Establish financial mutual aid funds for emergency medical or child care costs. And then again, document discrimination incidents. Per, like save everything because it's gonna come back. Let's get through the finale and then we can open up for questions. Sound cool? So, the reality of the situation we are in with the United States federal government is that there is little to nothing you can physically do to stop the United States government from exercising its will over you. And if you disagree with me, I would implore you to ask any country who has had a disagreement with the United States. The freedom from accepting that is going to give you guys the ability to return our focus. I say you guys, myself included. I partially made this presentation to center myself on what to do. The freedom that comes from accepting, hey, the super crazy thing is super crazy, and we're not getting out of that one. We're not surviving a shootout with ICE. That's that's not, I don't think that's the reality we need to be preparing for because it's just there are so much more things we could be doing right now that mitigates how bad things could get. We are on our own. There is no Messiah. There's no superhero. It's not going to happen with Zoran. It's not going to happen with Gavin Newsom. Nobody is coming to save the transgender community. Nobody is coming to save anybody. But that means we're not alone. We don't need these institutions to take care of each other. It has never been the case. If you ask previous generations, they will tell you mutual aid and support networks and community organizing is nothing new. Before these protections ever existed, it was the only way to get things done. You couldn't get a job, couldn't get health care, but we were able to take care of each other. It is scary to see federal protection being stripped from us and to feel that the system actively hates us, but the reality is that's always been the case. And the quicker we accept that, the quicker we can embrace the power of our community and endure this. because there is no making it go away. We have to endure it and we have to rebuild what honestly we lost. Secession from this system is necessary. Mutual aid and support networks are not a temporary solution until things get better. They are the pathway to seceding from an abusive economic system that leaves us in a constant state of vulnerability. Our security and our prosperity as an individual, as a community, as one unified people is not compatible with centralized forms of government and tyrannical economies, even if we controlled it. How we're going to get through this is we're respecting and loving ourselves and others. This is not the time to let yourself go. If anything, now is the time to do everything you've been putting off for yourself. Stay hydrated, sober up, get some sunshine, and cherish what joy that you do have in your life today. It is the fuel that drives us forward. And without it, none of this matters. There are power in numbers. It's an immediately accessible power today that cannot be stopped by any government. We can find real world ways to connect, leave public platforms, and explore private digital spaces. We're going to concerts, we're going to protests. We are doing anything but going into hiding because that is exactly how they win. And lastly, in addition to financially supporting mutual aid networks, many of us have skills that make our time, excuse me, many of us have skills that make our time much more valuable than our money. So unless you are truly rich and useless, um, stack that money. Donate your time, donate your labor to the cause. Because 99 times out of 100, whatever money you got is much better kept with you, maybe in a local credit union, not a large bank, so that you can be in a position to help others. And lastly, for legal reasons, I want to reiterate nothing in this presentation was or is intended to encourage or advocate for the violation of any law or to conspire against any government or organization. And use discretion and be an adult. Thank you guys very much. Thank you for your patience with my little rambles, and thank you for being here and supporting the wonderful folks over here at Plume. Thank you guys. Stop sharing. I kind of blacked out. Did the presentation go well? Cool, cool. Well said words. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. And you know what? I'm only 9 minutes over. Violet, you know, even for my shows, that's like a good. We're only 9 minutes over. That's actually pretty good.
You're doing awesome.
Let me put my headphones on since we're gonna be talking. Um, I hope you guys like my PowerPoint. I haven't made one since college. So
No, you
yeah,
did good.
so thank you very much, Violet. I'll ask you to mute again real quick. I don't know the formal thing for how we're gonna do this Q&A. I guess maybe if we want to do hand raise, we can just like unmute at that point and we can just kind of have a little conversation. But yeah, let's see some hands. Participants, where's the isn't there like a way to raise your hand? I left my corporate job like a year and a half ago, so I already forgot soon. I'd like to mention that. Oh yeah, yeah. I'd like to mention that Prism and Plume's Prism. No, no, no. These are very different. Yeah, Prism is an acronym. Wait a minute. Or is it? Interesting. You mean the trans healthcare clinic was also named Prism? Raise hand under react. Okay, where are my hands raised? You know what? I can't see it. Let's just move forward. Someone unmute. Ask me a question. Anybody? Anybody got a question?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
So I am a trans woman who's currently working as a graduate teaching assistant. I am trying to maintain that job as best as I can while also doing local activism, but I've also seen multiple people on campus. As soon as people even know they're involved with that, they immediately lose their jobs. And this is how I'm uh, getting through this graduate program and paying for the apartment I live in currently. So I guess, how do you recommend balancing uh, trying to sort of make a difference in your community with like that need to not,
Yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah, no,
saying?
yeah, I get what you're saying because most of us can't afford to crash out. That's the reality of what's going on. Most of us have some responsibility over something beyond ourselves, and in many ways that's a good thing, but it also is a huge and kind of intended systemic obstacle to mass collective action. So my rule of thumb that I would ask anybody to consider is back to when I was talking about mutual aid networks. If you can conclude that, hey, I don't have millions of dollars that I could, because anything that's not millions of dollars with stuff like this is just like a drop in the ocean. It's much better, even if you had $100,000, keep that in your bank because if shit hit the fan, you would have $100,000 that you could help with mutual aid. Like that's really powerful. So when I think about something that came to mind, Emily, is the concept of the German citizens during Nazi Germany who had the ability in the sense of owning a house, having the assets and infrastructure to be able to make the decision to secretly shelter Jewish families in their attic. So when we think about the folks who were able to host Anne Frank, they were obviously a group of people who disagreed with the Nazi administration, but they made whatever decisions they made that led them to keeping their house and remaining active in what was kind of just enemy territory, um, while kind of being a sleeper cell for the right moment at the right time, and that sacrifice that those people made to not crash out allowed the preservation of Anne Frank's diary. So keeping that concept alive, I would recommend that you do not throw your life away over something that not there is no one person that's gonna you know, save everything. It's collective action. It's a daily sustainable show up situation and the quick fix of how do we make this go away tomorrow was every meeting you didn't show up to over the course of your life or everything, whatever. We're here. It is better, Emily, that you maintain your path to your degree, maintain your ability to be of service, and to find encrypted, low risk ways to facilitate whatever's going on in your community. And I will stop talking. Does anybody else have a question? Hell yeah, Corbin. Love that. Cool. Well, I'll keep it open for a little longer. If anybody has questions, feel free to unmute, chime in. You can also type it if needed. I know voices can be a whole thing for us.
I just want to say you did amazing as a graphic designer and whatever you had us all enraptured.
Oh my God, thank you, Corbin. I appreciate that. Shout out Google Slides. I used the icebreaker template and just kind of worked with it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Also, I love the hat. I love the hat. I'm turning 30 in March, so I kind of want one.
I'm 43. I'm going to be 44 in March.
Hell yeah. I love that. All right, does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's like too broad. I've
Ask
been kind
away.
of like, I've been trying to organize a lot of my friends along the lines that you were talking about for a number of years. It's like a pretty varied group, but we have a lot of people who are pretty precarious and then some people who are like more privileged. And it just, it seems like every time I try to get people together, uh, it sort of never happens. Like they want to show up and have like me have done all the work already and I'm like
Yeah.
super not able to do that. And I am
Yeah.
not sure if you have any like resources or tips on like how to get a like little bit of buy-in and a little bit of work
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
people can like get the hang of it.
Yeah, no, totally. I get exactly what you're saying. I mean, so like I relate to that even like in my creative pursuits. I meet a lot of people. I mean, people are ultimately, I'll just say that I relate to that in the music community because it is like pulling teeth to get people to want to be famous with me. Crazy. I'll be like, "Hey, I have a crazy idea and documented success of how to make it happen. Would you like to use your legs and apply legwork to this situation? Here's specifically how you can do it." And people are like, yeah, that sounds great. And then like I call them in 3 days, like, hey, it's time for our session. They're like, oh, I got this thing going on. I'm like, do you want to fucking do this at all? And you see this a lot with progressive action because it is really easy to romanticize this, like, you know, uh, fucking Kylie Jenner opening up a fucking Pepsi can. Like, but the reality is it's scary. We were just talking about how most people cannot afford to crash out and they can't afford to throw their life away. And I feel that emotionally, when we think about how our brains feel one, brains say one thing and our bodies feel another. I think our bodies can feel imminent danger with something as unpredictable as taking on the Trump administration. And it can feel so vaguely life and death, even the act of going to a meeting to talk about organizing a protest and all of those sorts of things. This is what you're seeing is the effect of fascism. It is the effect of the fear. So the way to get past that is sales and sexiness. That is my whole ethos of how I approach progressivism, how I'm approaching everything is I am of the opinion that in the perception of the neurotypical entertainment centered world, progressive people are boring. And it's cool to be rich and hedonistic. And so socially, that's just how we work. And that's because of media brainwashing. That's because of colonialism. It's a whole thing. You know, we're separated from indigenous knowledge. Eastern philosophy has a lot more pragmatism, all of these things. So this shit goes really, really deep. So I take it there to say, yeah, it is a broad question because it's a really broad effect. Like the same thing that got Trump elected is the same thing that's preventing your people from putting in some work. And the reason they want the work done for them is the same reason we haven't been able to collectively organize. So what needs to happen is I would recommend you read books on sales. I would recommend you read and learn the process of sales, specifically big ticket, high dollar sales. Anything that's focused on six, seven, and eight figure dollar contracts, understanding macro level pain points and how to really get psychologically into people's heads to convince them that not to convince them to give you what they want, but to convince them that what they want is what you're describing. And when you can connect those two things, people like you take when you can get it to click for them, they will like in the sales world, they give you their whole bank account. Here. In the progressive world, this could be full whole buy-in. And I think psychologically we need sales. It's why Zoran is the first openly elected socialist man. Like, what's the one thing we all are very aware of with Zoran? He is fun to watch. The concept of democratic socialism was made sexy, fun, clear, and understandable by someone who had a very dialed in sales pitch. Um, with a lot of like real teeth to back it up, and he swept the election. I think we should be studying Zoran more than any other person. Um, because that is how we get the shit done. And it might not. I was just joking with my friend River, indigenous friend of mine. We were talking about kind of how do we get white people to buy into decolonization, and I jokingly brought up how mindfulness is kind of this gentrified wave of Eastern philosophy. And we've found ways for white culture to really adopt, myself included, adopt the benefits of meditation because we have convinced ourselves that it's our idea. And so I kind of jumped there. I said, can we just like for a decade let white people think that they invented communism or something? And just like, just so we could get in and then we can knock them down back down a peg. Like, so Erica, I would say by any means necessary, convince them it's their idea and it's in their best interest. That doesn't mean go in and gaslight and be messy about it, but I would say start immersing yourself in psychological persuasion because that is our only way forward. I don't think debates or facts or saying like don't you care about all the kids in Gaza because they don't. Okay? So what now? The kids are still dying. So like we have to find some other way to get through to them. So I am a rapper who doesn't voice train because that is a really effective way to get in front of people's faces and plant seeds of ideas in people's heads. And whatever collateral damage I get from that, whatever I cause from that, I'm trying to mitigate and I'm trying to learn. Part of why I did this presentation, but we really need to be trying to have as much fun with this as possible. That's probably all I'll say there. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we're at 6:22. I don't know if this like closes at any given point or if I'm hogging PlumeCon. Am I the last of the night? I hope I'm not hogging PlumeCon. Am I the headliner for Saturday? Friday night headliner from Chicago to China. Yeah. Hey. We're the last of the night. Okay, well, you know what? If anybody has any questions, I guess you can drop off if you're done. Corbin, grandson and I have been texting. When he's back from tour, we're supposed to hang out. So he's a real sweet guy. Very very excited to play around with this stuff. Um, Definitely the headliner. Cool. Um, anybody. Jordan, you were here first. Hannah, you've been locked in. Anybody got a question? Ooh, I see Autumn. Autumn Schultz. Oh no, that's a clap. Is that a
Hi,
clap or a
sorry,
hand?
I thought that was the hands up.
You're good. Speak up.
Okay. So this is Autumn's wife, Rose. I just took her phone for a second. Nice to meet you. Fan of your work. You were saying, you mentioned a couple times the pendulum swinging in this direction, and that alludes to you believing that it will swing inevitably to the opposite direction.
Mhm.
I want to hear a little bit more on that, and how long do you think that swing will be?
Yeah.
Or how long do you think that swing in the opposite direction will be?
Yeah, no, it is a great question. I think right now, as things stands, things are going to get worse before they get better.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know if I can quote you on years, but my guess is sometime within a decade because there's a couple different things happening right now. So I mentioned that we are currently seeing since the financial crisis of 2001, we are seeing for the third time in the past 25 years the largest upward transfer of wealth in recorded history. This is currently happening through the AI bubble as well as the devaluation of the US dollar. So there are some kind of macroeconomic forces that are happening right now that the fascist government of the Trump regime, I'm sorry, I'm literally just contradicting myself. I'm trying to like not speak in that way. That the Trump regime is currently trying to cause mass distraction from through culture war because what this is just like what I was saying, transphobia is actually not our biggest problem as trans people because we'll die of homelessness way before a death camp. And if we were resilient enough, then like, yeah, maybe. But the point I'm saying is we are currently experiencing a $315 trillion debt bubble. This is a bubble that has been passing down the road since 1694 when the Central Bank of London was first created and the central banking system as we know started. So a quick I guess quick history on what that is. The Central Bank of London was the first global central bank, and they started providing loans, war loans specifically to the British Empire. specifically to fight France. And then France wanted some money. So they lent them some money. And the way these loans were created is that the government would never be responsible to repay the principal of the loan. So, if I gave you $10 billion at 10% interest, you would never have to pay back that $10 billion. The terms of the loan were simply the government would, in perpetuity, forever, never, like for all of eternity, would pay the interest of that initial loan. So when we talk about government debt and we talk about bonds and all of these things, and you keep hearing like the debt ceiling and all that, what we're talking about is a rolling snowball of bank funded war funding. Sorry, bank provided war funding for various regimes since the late 1600s. So every war you can possibly think of was funded by these banks. Um, all of the industry, like the entire capitalist world, is funded by these banks. So that $315 is a tab that humanity has yet to pay, but also, according to the terms of the banks, cannot pay. It cannot be paid. And so what's happening is mixed with this crazy bubble and all of these social tensions caused by incremental greed from these billionaires, because it's just been like little by little by little by little. They've just been getting a little too greedy to now we're starting to have mass class consciousness because it's getting bad enough for people to really, look at the pain of change, because the pain is staying the same and starting to get way too much. And please stay with me because I do have a point here. The macroeconomic forces and this snowball is about to hit the bottom of the mountain. The elephant in the room is global warming. The elephant in the room is a particular climate condition that human society in the past 12,000 years has never had to endure. And we have zero experience or resources geared towards surviving that type of climate. And so everything we know about geopolitical conflict, everything we know about being trans, everything we know about Erykah Badu's music is all under the context of habitable climate, breathable air, fertile soil. When those things start to go away, which they already have been over decades, but it's about to get really fast and really intense. So we have the debt, and that's a ticking time bomb. We have when we break 3 degrees Celsius is another ticking time bomb that will accelerate what's happening. The income inequality that the billionaire ruling class of the capital market is possibly too far gone and too far removed from the realm of humanity to start waning off the fentanyl of being a billionaire in order to engage in reparative action that would allow for more complacent populations to go along with it. So Autumn, or I guess, sorry, Rose, my take is that the Christian nationalists are far too selfish and therefore far too stupid to actually pull off what they want to pull off, because if they wanted to put the Bible into law, if I wanted to do that, the very first thing I would do is, in the name of Jesus, end poverty. The first thing I would do is I would propagandize everyone. I would brainwash the entire public. I'd say, hey, all the roads are fixed, and that's because of Jesus. All the schools are free, and that's because of the Holy Spirit. Healthcare is free, and that's because of God. Because they can't even do that, what they're going to do is the exact opposite. They're going to keep the pageantry, which is what we're seeing, while they're just gutting everything that is keeping us afloat right now. As they do that, as the climate warms, as food, all of these things, eventually the pop is going to happen. What I hope it isn't is violent civil war where brother shoots brother, sister shoots sister. Um, what I hope happens is we start to see, for example, like a sweep in the midterms. And we start to see, like what I'm talking about, we start to see a cultural shift in rolling up your sleeves and getting off your Instagram feed and locking into the school board meetings and doing the unsexy work that hasn't been done in mass over previous generations. So this pendulum swing that I'm talking about is things are going to get worse. People are going to starve. AI is going to displace up to 50% of the workforce. And when that happens and there's no plan to feed anybody, we are going to immediately look up because at a certain point we can't actually kill all of each other. We're gonna look up and we're gonna be like, okay, something's not fucking working, and that's exactly why we saw Zoran win. Trump scared people so bad that they turned to somebody who used a scary word like socialism. You will start to see worker focused policies, and the culture of America will shift back to what it was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, which was celebrating and romanticizing the American worker, the middle class man who worked at the factory and had the 40-hour week minimum wage job, who had a house with a car and two kids. That was, if anything, at least for white America, the golden age, economically speaking. Um, Part of that was the media culture centered around America at the time was celebrating the hard work of America. You know what I mean? Like the work ethic, the willing to be consistent, and do what needs to be done to do your family. What happened in the 80s with Reagan and when the greed took over, that's Reagan is kind of where a lot of this started because culturally in the 80s we shifted from taking pride in your work to taking pride in your status, in your things. We started seeing shopping malls popping up all over America, and the media culture of the hot blonde teenage girl who's like whatever blowing bubblegum at the mall, that all kind of came from that. And so what's happened is with color TVs being put in every room, uh being, the boob tube started taking over. We started getting brainwashed by commercialism, and more we got away from a culture and an internal sense of self that is not averse to work. And this is when I started to sound like a boomer. A lot of Gen Z people don't want to work. A lot of millennials, and I understand why, because I also feel that. We feel like we were duped. And so there is this kind of sense of like, well, what the fuck do I owe you? You don't owe me anything. We owe it to ourselves because no one's going to come save us. And I think the pendulum swing that I'm referring to is the mass adoption of that mindset because once 300 million people get to work on a pretty singular objective, it's going to get done. It's like not even a question. There's 300 million people. You can't incarcerate all of us and what, have one fucking cop driving the road? You can't actually do that. So that is kind of my long answer for what the pendulum shift and the swing and all of that. I have optimism for the future if we are able to root our culture in pragmatic hard work. And now I'll look at the chat because I just saw a bunch of stuff coming in. Rose, was that a good answer for you, or is there anything that I didn't answer?
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic answer. Thank you. That
Okay,
answered a lot.
cool, awesome. Does anybody have any other questions? Cool. All right, well, I'll give another 60 seconds before that. I'll start kind of escaping my little full screen here. I really appreciate everybody coming through, spending a part of their Saturday night here learning about fascism and community organizing from a white trans rapper. Um, can I share any reliable news sources? That is something that I'm still learning myself. I'm still trying to figure out. I think the Associated Press is a good one to start with if we're talking about like a US based organization. Associated Press is one that I know is relatively fact-based and not really narrative focused. Another thing you can do that I recently learned is kind of goes back to the whole surveillance and data collection. If you are able to employ a VPN, like NordVPN is a more popular one, but Molvad is one that I hear a lot about. If you're able to use a VPN and then visit American news sources from another country, you will see what the news looked like before Mark Zuckerberg, which would be, hey, here's a geology thing that happened. Here, like here's a scientific discovery, here's a political thing, here's an art thing, here's a feel-good story. The news used to be like when I was a kid, the news was I kind of just yeah, there was narrative and there was bias, but it was focused more on clearly conveying what actually happened so that people would traffic to that news site or that news source because it's like, hey, this is where I feel like I get the best understanding of what's going on. What's happened lately is not necessarily, this is what's interesting. It's not necessarily that Fox News inherently now pushes out exclusively hateful alt-right stuff. What has happened is the way Fox News as a digital entity has started to operate is the way a lot of these organizations operate, which is on a individual IP basis. Or even in a more broad sense, in a like consumer profile standpoint. So my IP, I've had enough social interaction on the internet that Peter Thiel, Elon, and Mark know that I am a loud, hard left trans woman. Like they know that about me, and they know there's all this psychological things that they know that how I like to make purchases, how I like to do all of that. They have all these data points that build psychological profiles on people that say, hey, you're an impulsive buyer. You're someone who likes to do a lot of research. So similar to that intersectionality thing of how we're going to deal with our own shit, um, big data kind of takes an intersectional way in serving you targeted ads. So everything you've been seeing with targeted ads also applies to articles you see. Violet, you see your own version of the internet. Hannah, you see your own version of the internet. We actually do not experience the same thing. I'm talking to the point of like one word could be different. They have thousands of consumer profiles. And I promise this is part of the answer. I know I talk a lot. They have all these consumer profiles, and they're geared towards creating the best intended result based on how you psychologically operate. So I say this in regards to news is because the news will literally publish thousands of different articles, very slightly tweaked, that go to different people. So when you type in CNN.com, you don't get the same CNN that I do. And it might be one word, or we might be in the same thing. We might not notice it. But the reality is they are serving people different versions of the truth, geared psychologically on data to create a specific reaction from you. So if you use a VPN, you can go to those same sites and there's no need exclusively because it's disguising the consumer profile, it's going to go to the default, which is kind of closer to what the news used to be. And I remember when I tried this for the first time, I don't have a VPN installed on this, otherwise I'd just share my screen and show you. But it kind of blew me away because I looked up Fox News, for example, and it was a whole bunch of like hateful right-wing stuff that is designed to make me click on it and get really mad. I did the same. I went to the same site on the same computer with a VPN coming from like Denmark, and there was only like two political articles. Everything else, like it was a Fox News website. It had something about volcanic activity. It had something about this and something about that. I'm like, this just looks like a news site. What the fuck? So when we're talking about where do you get your news, I would recommend using a VPN to visit domestic US news sources. You can also visit global news sources, not necessarily like the BBC, but look at organizations that uniquely report on global issues and do not have allegiance to any particular country. I think that is where you'll get more relevant news. And kind of back to what I was saying about the $315 debt bubble, when we're talking about the fact that the United States, I didn't even talk about the world reserve currency because that's a whole other thing. If we really fuck up our image and they pull the US dollar from the world reserve currency, every ounce of leverage we have in our supply chain, every ounce, like everything that's allowed us to be a bully to the world is because the US dollar is the world reserve currency. If they pull that, that's kind of when we're talking about like the Civil War and the slaughter in the streets, that is kind of what's going to happen. Because then nobody has food. Um, but yeah, so for news, I would recommend trying to find ways to bypass your means of being identified as a consumer profile. If you can find ways to anonymously view these sources, you actually won't really have to be overly picky over your news source. You just have to kind of conceal uh, the way in which they can identify and then manipulate the specific thing you click on. Oh, I forgot to turn off AI in my Gmail. That is something I have to do. Thank you, Corbin. Um, the great echo chamber. Use DuckDuckGo. Yeah, no, DuckDuckGo is a great browser, I've heard. I feel like that should be the last question. Thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Aries. I go by Damage, DAMAG3. I make mostly really loud, aggressive, hip hop music that kind of focuses on a lot of what we talked about. I have a lot of music out. I have a lot of music coming out. I will be going on tour for the entire month of April and the entire month of May. I have 30 dates booked, and I will be announcing very soon. I'll drop actually in the chat if you guys are interested in signing up for the ticket wait list. This will get you first in line. I just made this yesterday. Um, and beyond that, thank you guys so much. Thanks again to the folks at Plume. If any of the organizers are still on, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I looked at Plume as an option for HRT when I was first looking at it and when I didn't have any music out and I was just a little old me. And it's a really interesting full circle moment. So thank you guys so much for sitting through this and have a wonderful night. Hopefully I'll see you in the Discord and maybe on the road. Y'all have a good night. Bye.